Okay, Constable Crowcroft. Last bit of medieval St Helier behind us. A couple of years ago you wanted St Helier designated as a city. Was that a serious proposition?
I think, it's not at the top of my agenda, but St Helier would qualify for city status for a lot of reasons, and I don't think there would be any harm in it. It would help put us on the map. It would probably bring more visitors to the island. I don't know. It's the kind of thing that I've got on the back burner, and if it becomes a possibility, I would certainly. It's something I'd be happy to recommend to ratepayers. At the end of the day, it'd be up to the ratepayers to give it their backing.
Only unkindly, some people suggested that Birmingham-on-Sea was perhaps where we were heading with the sort of development that's taking place. Do you think that's a bit unkind?
Yeah, I don't know Birmingham that well, but I think St Helier is a tremendously attractive place to live in, to work, to visit. I've lived in town now for many years, and I'm very proud to be a town dweller. And nor am I particularly upset by the kind of developments we're seeing towards the south of town, because I think they reflect a great deal of business confidence in the island. And so long as that business confidence is there, we're going to have a vibrant economy, albeit I agree with people that it's lopsided, and I'm certainly one of many states members that thinks that we've got to do more about tourism to make, to continue to attract visitors to Jersey.
Well, the current waterfront plan, the one which there's so much discussion about, includes 600,000 square feet of offices. But the plan, when you read it, says that that's not new offices, that's to relocate existing offices largely out of the centre of Old St Helier, and we're in the centre of Old St Helier. Isn't that rather a formula for disaster, to actually tear the commercial guts out of the old centre? And what will happen to all those old office spaces?
Yeah, that's one of the big arguments against the Esplanade Quarter scheme. Certainly, one of my biggest worries about the scheme at the start was the amount of retail in it, and that has been drastically reduced. The argument I've always used is that if you live or work in the Esplanade Quarter in the new district and you want to buy a shirt, you should have to come into the old St Helier into town proper to buy a decent shirt. And that, for me, that's a kind of criterion that, or a test that I apply, and I think that test is met. I think that most of the people who work and live in the new quarter, when it's eventually built, and we don't know when that's going to be, most of those people will flock into town to do most of their shopping, to do most of their socialising, and all those new units of accommodation, all those consolidated office premises, I think are going to continue to enrich town life.
But there's already, for example, there's 32,000 square feet of famously empty office space, never been occupied en route to Fort. Suppose it's sold as the gateway to St Helier when it was being built. Now nobody wants it. There's 82,000 square feet of office development approved on the Esplanade, which is suspended because nobody wants it. There's a parade development going ahead, another 50,000 square feet. Just behind us, the office to let. This is the situation as it is now, and in the world situation as it is, realistically, all this office space is a bit of a fiasco, isn't it?
Well, my understanding is that developers only build office spaces when they can let them, and that's why at the moment there is some uncertainty about the proposed Esplanade Quarter scheme. No developer is going to build that scheme unless they have tenants who are going to come into it. There is a lot of empty office space in the town at the moment. What I'm particularly pleased about, however, is that there is very little retail space, particularly in the heart of town, which is boarded up. And if you compare St Helier as a retail centre with many towns of a comparable size in the UK, percentage-wise, we have far fewer empty shops than other towns of this size.
So we have an awful lot of dead and dying areas. If you think from Cheapside Inn, New Street Inn, Columbia Inn, all these areas are dying, and they've been the subject of so-called regeneration schemes ever since the 1980s. Nobody's ever got down to it really. They're forever dividing up the town into 10 slots, but nobody ever produces the plan. And now, because of local agitation in the Anne Court and Place area, the planning minister has been sort of, all of a sudden, in 3 months, he's going to get out a complete redevelopment scheme for that side of St Helier, even though it was in the 2002 Island Plan and the 1987 Island Plan. It seems to be something not being taken too seriously, doesn't it?
I think progress is slow in terms of regenerating the areas you mentioned. I don't think it's fair to say that nothing has happened. I mean, Lamott Street, Snow Hill, Columbury area, traders a while ago now said they didn't want all the traffic pouring down Columbury that was happening at the time, and the on-street parking and the narrow pavements. And we went in and we put in the wider pavements. Other schemes are going in Lamott Street quite soon. Cheapside is the subject of a regeneration plan. So I think work is going on. Of course, I would much prefer to see quicker progress being made with town centre regeneration. But again, in the area just down to the west of us, around the town hall, York Street, again wider pavements, pedestrian priority areas.
Might be dismissed as window dressing, really. You've got a constable, yourself, you've got 10 deputies, I think, about 4 or 5 secretaries, all were interested in St Helier. The action in Anne Court was set up with a response. The minister's response was to a local group of just concerned residents. Isn't there something a bit skew here, all this political representation? Who's actually taking any notice of political representation in St Helier?
Well, a number of questions there, Mike. I think the way that the Anne Court residents have motivated and mobilised opinion has been really impressive, and the letter that was sent to me by the association was one of the best grassroots arguments that I've ever received, and it really has changed the way people are thinking about how we deliver the town park or how we deliver the parking element of it. And I welcome greater involvement of people in the political process. One of the hardest things about my job when I'm trying to improve facilities for young people, for pedestrians, for cyclists, is to find people out there in the community who actually agree with what I'm trying to do. They may have voted me in, but sometimes it's quite hard to get that kind of grassroots support.
The other great concern is, of course, there's an obsession in this island with protecting the countryside. And whatever else happens, the cows have got to have their sacred fields, they've got to have their 2 acres each. But everything else, people, every unsavoury activity, whether it's refuse disposal, whatever it might be, has to come into St Helier, and it seems to be a very small part of St Helier. Is this realistic? I mean, shouldn't some of these activities, some of these people be out there enjoying the rest of the island? Should the rest of the island just be the preserve of the rich?
I mean, a number of things to say to that. Firstly, if we're obsessed with preserving the countryside, the rural part of St Helier, I think that's a good thing. Jersey, is justly reputed for having a very unspoilt rural area, and I think we do need to preserve it, but not at the expense of putting every antisocial activity in the town. And while I do support concentrating housing in town, because I think towns need people, it's the lifeblood of a town to have more residents in it, I have been bitterly opposed, and I continue to fight. I was fighting this morning in the States in Question Time against the imposition of all of the refuse disposal, now the new incinerator, the composting site, most industrial activities being put in the heart of town, when it'd be much more appropriate to find tucked away parts of the island where these kind of activities can take place.
But why is it the country representatives seem to be much more powerful in the States than the town representatives? 15 or so representatives, in theory, could be speaking for the town, but a constable and a deputy in St John's or St Mary's, what they say seems to go. It doesn't seem to be fair, does it?
People have been asking that question for about 300 years of Jersey politics. The rural members have always ruled the roost, and we may well get to the stage, I hope we will get to the stage, possibly over the debate about the states paying rates, which I'm bringing, when the urban deputies and the urban representatives actually do win the debate. But there have been centuries of the rural parishes imposing their will on the town, and it's going to take an enormous political effort to turn that process around.